Everyone seems to agree that Edward II's reign was a disaster. His father, King Edward I, was a powerhouse and everything a medieval king needed to be. He was said to be clever, ruthless, intimidating, and was later described as one of the greatest rulers of his time. His son, however, was the opposite, known for spending his time idling with, quote, simple people, instead of hearing mass or winning battles. He was also said to be disposed to violent outbursts and had an alarming obsession with favourites. Let's travel back to the 14th century and try to discover who Edward II was, what led to his outstanding downfall, and whether he was really killed at Berkeley Castle in 1327 when a red-hot poker was inserted into his anus. Now, what would you do if you woke up tomorrow with a time machine? Go back and prevent the JFK assassination? Introduce Chuck Berry to that new sound he's been looking for? Or perhaps you'd like to go back in time and show off all of the fancy gadgets and tech of today's world to an unbeknownst medieval person. Well, with today's sponsor, the book The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding a Civilization, you could get ready to do exactly that. No, it's not a time machine, even better, it's an incredibly beautiful book featuring over 400 pages of the most amazing inventions of humankind. With over 180 topics divided into 23 chapters, every page of this book features awe-inspiring handmade illustrations, including unique engineer's drawings and medieval art. It uses clever engineering with high-quality matte art paper, and just look at this stunning laminated cover and special bindings. The book is a captivating illustrated encyclopedia and offers a fascinating journey through the most significant human inventions, appealing to both adults and children. It's not just a book, it's a fun and engaging way to explore history, making it perfect for your personal library or as a thoughtful gift for collectors, friends, parents, colleagues, and anyone with a curious mind eager to delve into the wonders of human innovation. But don't just take my word for it, the project collected more than $3.2 million investments on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, as well as achieving bestseller status in Germany and Italy, while also being an official bestseller on Amazon US. Over 50 professionals were involved in creating the book, ranging from artists to scientists, architects to designers, and more. This isn't just an ordinary history or scientific book, it's a totally unique concept and unlike any book I've owned before. So if you want to be time travel ready or simply want to impress with your Christmas gifting skills, make sure you grab the book using the link in the description below. And now for today's video. Welcome to Medieval Madness. King of the Mountain. Edward II was born at Carnarvon in April of 1284 when his father was sealing his conquest of Wales. He was the 14th child born to his mother, the Spanish Queen Eleanor of Castile, and the king. He was never meant to be monarch, but the fates were incredibly unkind to his parents and they lost more than half of their children to one medieval illness or another before reaching the age of 12. With all three of his older brothers dead, Edward became heir to the throne when he was just a few months old. He may have favoured his father in looks and build, being tall, handsome and strong, but their personalities were completely different. Even his pastimes were strange, as he rejected the usual activities of princes such as hunting, jousting and hawking, preferring more rustic pursuits and boorish occupations. According to the great English chronicler and Benedictine monk Ranulph Higden, quote, "This Edward II was a handsome man of great strength, but unconventional in his behaviour. For shunning the company of the nobility, he preferred that of jesters, singers, actors, carters, diggers, oarsmen, sailors, and other mechanics. He drank too much, betrayed confidences too easily, struck out without provocation at those standing around him, and followed the counsel of others rather than his own. He was extravagant and splendid in his lifestyle, voluble, inconsistent, unlucky against his opponents, and treated members of the household savagely." Flirting with disaster. Young Edward's biggest flaw was his fixation with his friends. Even at his coronation, with his wife Isabella by his side, Edward's childhood friend Piers Gaveston was given the spotlight. The king only had eyes for Gaveston, going so far as to present him with Isabella's jewels and wedding gifts. Was it a homosexual relationship in the way that we understand homosexuality today? Well, that's unclear. There are no contemporary sources that explicitly claim it was, although one writer stated that for Edward it was, quote, "the love that surpasses the love of a woman." Another wrote, quote, "I do not remember to have heard that one man so loved another. Our king was incapable of moderate favour, and on account of peers was said to forget himself." Higden noted that Edward became, quote, "passionately attached to one person above all whom he cherished, exalted, honoured, and showered with gifts." The result of such infatuation was that both the lover and the loved were held in odium, the people scandalised, and the kingdom brought to ruin. It could be that Edward was bisexual. He had 4 children with his wife Isabella and at least 1 illegitimate child. Gaveston was also married and had children. It could have been, as the anonymous author of Vita Edward Secundi, The Life of Edward II, stated, that the pair had a compact of brotherhood and an unbreakable bond. Such pacts were popular during the Middle Ages, especially between military men. What was clear was that Edward and peers were doing their best to offend the English nobility. A nobility that was set on reform and believed that whatever losses the kingdom suffered, it was because of the improper relationship between the king and Gaveston. They also felt this was a great opportunity to exert their authority over the young king, so they gave Edward an ultimatum: either get rid of Gaveston or face a civil war. So Gaveston was sent to Ireland to rule there and represent the king. But Edward was not happy and used bribery and threats against his nobles, who relented and let Gaveston return to England. Once home, the couple continued to treat them with contempt. Edward persisted in draining the treasury with his war on the Scots, and Gaveston carried on winding them up, even giving them nicknames such as Black Dog of Arden, Joseph the Jew, and Burst Belly. King of Pain. By 1310, things were starting to come to a head when almost all the earls and barons of England rose up against Gaveston and forced Edward to send him away. Edward remained but had to surrender his sovereignty as king. He was not allowed to make war, leave the realm, or make gifts without Parliament's approval. Gaveston was named an evil counsellor to the king and an evident enemy to the people, and was exiled from all English domains. Refusing to give his favourite up, the pair fled north, Edward abandoning his pregnant wife Isabella in the process. It was the Earl of Warwick, the man that Gaveston had ridiculed as the Black Dog, who caught the favourite and took him prisoner. Condemned as a traitor in June of 1312, the young Piers Gaveston, Earl of Cornwall, was run through with a sword and beheaded. Enraged, devastated, and humiliated, Edward tried to recover his position by using Gaveston's death as a negotiating tactic for the Baron's support of a new campaign in Scotland. It was at Bannockburn near the town of Stirling in June of 1314 that King Edward II suffered a crushing defeat. Leaving his troops to be slaughtered, Edward fled from the battlefield to Dunbar Castle before sailing back to England. According to the Vita, it was a day of ruin and dishonour, evil and accursed. Now, Edward was seen not only as a flawed politician, but also as a defective general and a coward. King of Wishful Thinking. Still monarch, but having learned nothing, Edward acquired a new favourite named Hugh Despenser, and just like his predecessor, he was showered with gifts and lands. The father of Edward's cherished friend was Hugh Despenser the Elder, one of Edward's most steadfast supporters, and it was the father and son's extraordinary rise to power and influence over the king that proved to be their downfall. Watching the king lurch from one crisis to another was his wife Isabella. She had stood by, humiliated over the Gaveston debacle, and now it was happening again. However, this time Isabella was the mother of the heir to the English throne. She was also older, wiser, and out of patience. In 1322, there was a new king on the French throne, Charles VI. Edward was summoned to pay homage for the Duchy of Gascony. When the English king refused, pro-English Gascons hanged a royal French sergeant, and the French invasion of Gascony began. As Despenser the Younger was responsible for conduct of policy in the duchy, he was blamed for the fiasco. It was Queen Isabella who was sent to clear up the mess in 1325, as she just happened to be King Charles IV's sister, and as King Edward wouldn't pay homage, her son Prince Edward was sent in his place. Crisis over, wife and son were expected to return to England immediately, but Isabella had other ideas. Quote, "I feel that someone has come between my husband and myself. I will not return until the intruder is removed," she declared publicly in Paris when referring to Despenser the Younger. Then she took a lover, Roger Mortimer, Earl of March, and vowed vengeance. The English invasion came quickly in September of 1326 when Isabella and Mortimer landed at Orwell, Suffolk. The small force was met with little resistance. The king and the Despensers fled. The Queen and her paramour marched down to the capital through a war-weary and disillusioned England. In London, supporters of the king began their desertion, and some of those who stayed came to a sticky end. John the Marshal, a Despenser spy, was dragged from his house and beheaded. Bishop Stapledon was decapitated with a bread knife as he desperately tried to reach the sanctuary of St. Paul's Cathedral. His body was thrown on a rubbish tip, his head sent to the Queen. Supporters flocked to her from all sides, earls to outlaws and bishops to barons, and she had little difficulty seizing the throne on behalf of her son King Edward III. Despenser the Elder was caught and executed for treason at Bristol. He was drawn by horses to the public gallows, hanged, cut down while still alive, and beheaded. Edward and the younger Despenser were hunted down in Wales and cornered. The place where they were captured is known as Pant y Brad, the Vale of Treachery. The younger Despenser was taken to Hereford, where, under no illusion of what was to follow, he tried to starve himself to death by refusing food and water. Nevertheless, he was, quote, bound in chains, his eyes bulging with terror, hanged until almost dead, castrated, and disemboweled before being decapitated. Whew, all that while still hungry and thirsty. King Edward II was accused of treason against the country, losing Scotland and Gascony, and oppressing and ruining his subjects in equal measure. He was the first English monarch to be deposed, and at 42 years of age, his reign was over. The coronation of his 14-year-old son, King Edward III, was held on February 1, 1327, with Mortimer as de facto ruler of England. His father was kept prisoner at the guardroom in Berkeley Castle, where it is said, with concerns over plots to have him liberated, he was murdered on the 21st of September. Or was he? Getting away with murder. Supposedly, Edward's death was assisted by the use of a red-hot poker so that there would be no signs of any external injuries, and then it could be said that he died from natural causes. If the 21st of September was the date that he died, then it was pretty convenient for Isabella and Mortimer. How do we know that he did die on that date? Well, it's recorded in the castle accounts of Berkeley Castle. However, as preparations were made for the funeral, the body was embalmed and wrapped in cerecloth, a waxed fabric used for wrapping dead bodies, before it was shown publicly. Could another body have been used in place of the king at the funeral in Gloucester? Lord Berkeley wasn't at the castle when the death was said to have occurred. He was 150 miles away, attending Parliament in Lincoln, where the members were all informed of the ex-king's death as they dispersed. The Archbishop of York stated that he had, quote, certain news that Edward was still alive in January of 1330, 3 years later. Also, in March of 1330, Mortimer had Edward II's half-brother Edmund, Earl of Kent, put on trial for trying to rescue Edward from Corfe Castle, and Edmund was sentenced to death. But when King Edward III overthrew Mortimer, and he went on trial in November for assuming royal power, it was said that he had tricked Edmund into believing that the dead king was still alive. Was he murdered? Did he die from natural causes? Could it be possible that almost everyone who was politically involved acted as though Edward II was dead because he really was? Or is it possible that Edward II lived beyond the date of his supposed death? Let us know what you think in the comments down below, and please do subscribe if you're enjoying these videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week for another one. Until then, hope everyone has an awesome week. Cheers!